What's up, everybody? This is Parker Hurley going through my team by team breakdowns of the 32 teams in the NFL, going through their regular season uh, review and then previewing their offseason. So I wrote 5 questions back in May about every team after the draft, said what I wanted to see or was wondering what was going to happen roster wise during the regular season. So we're going to answer those questions, then go through the roster and come up with new questions for that team. We're on to the 13th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons. So check out the other 12 teams on my YouTube channel. But for the Atlanta Falcons, my first question back in May was, do the Falcons have an answer at center? I said they were comfortable with Ryan Newsel. They lost Drew Dahlman. Is that going to be an issue for them? Because most of the rest of their offensive line seems pretty set. And Newsel ended up being pretty good. He started the entire season. He came in for Dahlman last season, but this year he got the full workload. Didn't have many significant issues, wasn't any of the reasons to blame for their issues. The biggest issue is that their right tackle went down for the entire season, very early into the season, really didn't even play for them. So that was their biggest issue on their offensive line, but center was not an issue. So that was not nearly as bad as I was wondering it was going to be. Was it smart to keep Kirk Cousins? I talk about how the perception and how the year before it didn't make sense to sign Kirk Cousins, but now that they have him under contract, given Penix's questions and the fact that it's going to be, they would have to either eat a lot of cap to trade him or not get picks back to trade him. I said it didn't make sense for them to get rid of Kirk Cousins, despite everyone thinking that they would. And that obviously came to be true. And I talked about how with Michael Penix, he has this long history of injuries, and he hasn't proven over a sustained ability that he was able to stick around in the NFL, and he got hurt, and Cousins ended up starting 8 games for them. And now that you look at Kevin Stefanski as the head coach, you think that Cousins is probably going to make it to his 3rd season with the Atlanta Falcons, when a lot of people, I mean, it obviously, head coach and GM got fired after they signed Cousins. And they had 8 and 9 seasons after signing Cousins. So it's not like this was a success, but it also, now they're 3 years into it and they've needed him in all 3 years. Unfortunately, I think the issue is that if they had just signed Cousins and didn't draft Penix, maybe who knows what impact player they draft in that spot, but that's really probably been their issue, that's why these people are fired. So I talked about how my third question is, what does this Drake London ceiling look like? London has progressed in each of his first 3 seasons. Heading into his 4th, this is the first year that he is a quarterback that's supposed to play the entire season with him. Obviously, Michael Penix got hurt and didn't play the entire season with Drake London, but he did go from 2.32 yards per route run last season to 2.34 this season, which made him 7th overall in yards per route run. Was one of the best receivers in the NFL this season. He just missed weeks 12 through 15, so his overall production wasn't quite as high as last year, but he was arguably a better receiver, and he is one of the best receivers in the NFL. So I mean, it kind of made sense, but it's just Penix got hurt and it didn't hit. But London was on pace to be one of the best, to have a really strong season. Who starts at safety? They lost Richie Grant. They brought in Jordan Fuller. They also drafted Xavier Watts. Is it going to be Xavier Watts starting at safety? And they also have Billy Bowman is what I wrote. And then, yes, Xavier Watts ended up being the guy who starts at safety. I said they would likely want that to happen. And he ended up being very good for them. And he's going to be a starter moving forward. And I thought he was underrated in where he got drafted at that point. So a real nice hit for the Falcons. And they seem like, despite the fact that, they're moving on from all those things, they seem to have had a pretty good set of, a good draft class here. Billy Bowman also started the first, I think, 7 games for them in the slot, and then he got injured, so they moved on to D. Alford in that spot. But either way, they were fine at safety this year with those rookies. And then I said, are the rookies ready to rebuild the Falcons defense? They went all in on Jelon Walker and James Pierce. They viewed both of them as top 10 picks and valued them as such. Did they just add 2 top 10 picks to their defense? Tough to say, because both of them were very good, and both of them, I think, finishing top 5 in defensive rookie of the year. Both of them are potential top 5. So they have 2 of the top 5 rookies on the defensive side of the football. But also James Pierce is a sack merchant. He did have a lot of sacks, but he doesn't play on rundowns, doesn't bring nearly anything on rundowns. And Jalen Walker kind of showed more of an all-around football skill set, but wasn't quite as dynamic in impact plays as James Pierce. So they're both pretty good as rookies, but it's just when this team went all in on Penix and went all in on those rookies, and now they traded. The Rams are picking 13th overall. I'll do the Rams later after their actual draft slot, but the Rams are going to pick 13th overall because this is the James Pierce pick. They traded whoever this is essentially for James Pierce at this point. I think a little bit more even, but is it going to be worth it when, like I said, even Vic Beasley had a lot of sacks for the Falcons as a rookie and wasn't a good run defender, and we saw how that went. So we can get excited about James Pierce, but we can also wonder about the future with James Pierce. So I don't think that ended up living up to their expectations. And they obviously didn't want to pick 13th overall when they thought that they were trading that pick to the Falcons or to the Rams. So moving on to my offseason roster reset and everything like that. Kirk Cousins, when I initially looked into it, I thought his contract is officially tradable, and they're going to have to do something with, there's a huge cap hit of $90 million coming, so they may have to smooth it. But the reality is with Michael Penix has an ACL injury. He's not going to be ready for the start of this season. He's shown not enough in his first couple seasons. And he's been injured, and he has a history of injuries going back to Indiana and all of those things. Before he transferred, he was getting injured in college. So you're picking 13th overall. You have not the most cap space. You're not like loaded with draft picks. You pretty much just have to go in there with Kirk Cousins for a season, bite the bullet, and then next season is really like the start of the rebuild or whatever. And then Kirk Cousins obviously has a relationship with Kevin Stefanski, so I know Cousins is coming off of the worst year of his career. He's 38 going on 39 with a repaired Achilles, and he got benched his first year back. He had his lowest ADOT, his lowest completion percentage on that ADOT, and his lowest yards per attempt on all of that in his second year back. So it's not like you can trust Kirk Cousins to be a starter, but it's where is your other out here? Is it drafting somebody in the 4th round, and hoping that, or the 2nd or 3rd round, and hoping that person ends up working out? I could certainly see that. So quarterback is potentially, despite the fact that they have 2 signed on their roster, one's getting significant cap, one's getting significant draft capital, they still have a need at quarterback. So that's unfortunate for them. Bijan Robinson, they're going to pick up his 5th-year option and extend him. The question is, with Tyler Algier gone, do they add some sort of complement? They obviously will, but how much does he cut into his workload? And then Kevin Stefanski, I think, with a guy like Bijan Robinson, is going to be obviously excellent in fantasy football, so that's good. Darnell Mooney, $18 million. I think they could save a good bit of that by cutting him. Had a really poor season coming off of an injury, a new coaching staff. The issue is that where are you going to find wide receiver? And at least Mooney brings some sort of speed element. The other thought is that Stefanski seems to lean heavily into tight ends. Kyle Pitts is a free agent. They would like to Charlie Warner is signed, and potentially a blocking tight end in that mold, maybe even an upgrade over Warner, a blocking tight end in Pitts. So they have Bijan, London, they bring back Pitts, they have a blocking tight end. They only need a complementary 5th player, skill player, to be that second wide receiver. Do they save some cap space considering they're going to keep Kirk Cousins in his loaded cap hit? Do they try to move out in front of Darnell Mooney by moving him? And they could potentially try and trade him this offseason. But otherwise, they have Kaderil Hodge and Casey Washington, who showed this season that they're not good enough. Like I said, Kyle Pitts is a free agent. I think the Stefanski news is good for his prospects of coming back. But also, I think he could see, that he had his rookie contract. It hasn't gone well in Atlanta, and he wants to move forward, so they may need a tight end. So that will be interesting to see. Like I said, McGarry's coming back from an injury. They should re-sign Matthew Bergeron. I think that they will. And then Caleb McGarry, Ryan Newsel, Chris Lindstrom. I think all 5 of their offensive linemen should be back. And if not, it would just be a hole at left guard. So I think most of their offensive line should be fine. Like I said, at edge rusher, you have Jalen Walker and James Pierce. They're going to need someone else because Pierce, like I said, doesn't play many rundowns. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, especially with edge rusher. They probably try and get like a $6 million guy, just some sort of guy who can defend the run and doesn't have much pass rush juice, because Pierce is going to bring all of that. But it'll be interesting also. I mean, guys like Zach Harrison could slide outside for some snaps, depending, what they want to do with their defense here in Atlanta. Then some of these picks, Ruka Roro, Brandon Dorless, David Onyemata is actually a free agent. I don't know if he'll be back. And then Zach Harrison, I think they need some help along the interior defensive line. It's just unfortunate that with Dorless and Roro, they put, second round picks into those guys. But I think they're going to need some help along the interior. So it's mainly just looking for, depth and bodies to rotate in on the defensive line. So it's not like it's a huge need, but I do see them needing things on the defensive line. Devon Diablo was having a pretty good season before he got injured. And then Ellis is a free agent for them this offseason as well. So, I mean, with new coordinators and things like that, I could see a new linebacker coming in to play this offseason. Maybe even Devin Bush from the Browns. So, to cornerback, they have A.J. Terrell, obviously, potentially a trade candidate, but I doubt it. Then Mike Hughes is signed, and he started last year. He's like that, like his WAR is like 0 in baseball is how I would define Mike Hughes. Like you could do worse than Mike Hughes, but you would try to do better than Mike Hughes. I just don't think they have anybody right now that has shown that they can necessarily do better. Like I said, I thought Billy Bowman was impressive as a rookie and could slot into the slot in year 2. And then they have Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts as their safeties. So they also have some depth at safety. So they should probably feel pretty good about those positions on the defensive side of the ball. So going to my needs, quarterback, like I said, despite their needs, wide receiver and tight end, it'll be interesting to see how they kind of shake that out and how they fill those holes. Like I said, interior defensive line and edge, they have some depth holes. Ellis, they're looking to replace at linebacker, and then cornerback, whether it be Mike Hughes or, what do they feel about Billy Bowman in the slot? They do have some back end needs, but I think for the majority, it's going to be figuring out quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end. And then some of those figuring out that defensive line, kind of not reshaping and not rebuilding it is the word that I would use. So my 5 questions, I think I wrote this before they traded or signed Kevin Stefanski, because I don't think they're going to trade Kirk Cousins, but then, I mean, it still is a question of who is starting week 1 for the Falcons, or who is in line to start week 1 for the Falcons. Do they add younger competition for Michael Penix because they have Kirk Cousins? Do they re-sign any of Onyemata, Pitts, or Ellis, and do all of those create holes? Like I said, I think Pitts of the 3 will be back, but then I think interior defensive line and linebacker are things that they can upgrade this offseason. Do they extend London? I think that's an obvious. And then do they cut Mooney, and how do they replace him at wide receiver? I talked about that. I think if they re-sign Pitts, I don't think they need significant assets at receiver. If they don't re-sign Pitts, I'll be interested to see, because then they have some pretty big roster holes here. Should they shake up their defensive line? I talked about that. Between Pierce is only a run defender. Guys like Ororo and Dorless are rotational guys. Harrison is kind of an inside-out guy. They need, just a little more, maybe get some young guys in there or get some depth in there to kind of help with the rotation and everything like that. And then do they upgrade opposite of A.J. Terrell? Do they upgrade over Mike Hughes? And do they believe in Billy Bowman? Or do they just not address cornerback nearly that much? Because if they think Hughes, Terrell, and Bowman are fine with Watts and Jesse Bates in the back end, then they really don't have many needs at cornerback or safety. So they could kind of focus on other positions, like I said, getting stronger up front and then adding some skill players. So that's what I think of the Atlanta Falcons. I'm Parker Hurley. Check out everything I do on my YouTube channel here. We'll get to the 14th overall pick tomorrow, and we're just going to keep going through every team.